Chief, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. Being a conservative Republican in Boulder County is kind of like being a ham sandwich at a bar mitzvah. It's kind of rare. Actually, there are over 46,000 registered Republicans in Boulder. Most people don't know that. And yet, when you try to talk about this idea of liberty to your sphere of influence, your friends, your family, it's often hard. I find it difficult, especially in the People's Republic. So how do you do that? I often study the greats of the past and try to find inspiration. One is Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president of the United States. In 1861, President Lincoln wrote what has become known as the fragments of the Constitution. Embedded in that are some words I'd like to share with you because I think they're significant. And I quote, "All of this is not the result of an accident. It has a philosophical cause. Without the Constitution and the Union, we could not have achieved the result. Even with these, there is something back of these, entwining itself more closely about the human heart. That something is the principle of liberty to all. The principle that clears paths for all, that gives hope to all, and by consequence, enterprise and industry for all. The expression of that idea in our Declaration of Independence was most happy and fortunate. The assertion of that principle at that time was the word fifthly spoken, and has proven to be an apple of gold for us. The Union and the Constitution are a picture of silver, subsequently framed around the apple. The apple was made not to be concealed or destroyed, but to be preserved and adorned. The pitcher was made for the apple, not the apple for the pitcher. So we must act and make sure we understand that the pitcher and the apple are not blurred or bruised or broken. That we may so act, we must study and understand the points of danger." That's the end of the quote. What Lincoln is saying there so eloquently, he's reaffirming for us the brilliance, the intelligence that came together with our founding fathers. For the first time in human history, people were acknowledged as individuals. Think about the idea of we all being equally human. But how do you share that idea in an iPod, iPad, iPhone world? I would contend it's pretty difficult. Lincoln was the great liberator. I'd like to share with you the story of the lizard. The lizard is my daughter, Melissa. That was her nickname when she was an elite gymnast. She studied under the great Li Ning from China. Anybody see the Beijing Olympics where the opening ceremonies and a gentleman was flying around with the torch? That's who my daughter studied under. When she would be on the balance beam, can you imagine being up in the air on this little piece of wood, getting ready to do a backflip? I would be up in the stands, a proud father, and I would yell, "Stick it, lizard!" Oh, that would make her so mad. What would she do? She would tighten up and boom, and she'd land and she'd stick it. As an Olympic wannabe, that's important. One time, my folks took my daughter Melissa to the Magic Kingdom for a magical day. My mom and dad stopped at one of those Main Street gift stores. And as a memento, they said, "Melissa, would you like to have something of our day?" Of course, she's 9 years old. She said, "Yeah." So there's a table there with these figurines of all the Disney characters. And she's hemming and hawing. My dad said, "Pick one out." "Oh, Grandpa, I can't decide. But if I get these right here, they'll finish my collection." My dad says, "Okay." Now, being a grandfather myself, I understand how little girls can melt grandfathers' hearts. So they bought all the pieces. An hour later, they drove back to Los Angeles, and my daughter bounces in the house. "Mommy, Daddy, guess what Gigi and Grandpa bought me?" And they start opening this bag and taking the tissue paper off these figurines. And they're putting it on the table one by one. And my dad says, "Melissa, go get the rest of your collection. We'll put them together on the table and we'll admire them." And I just walked in the room at that point and I said, Dad, I think you've been had. Melissa doesn't own any of these. You just bought her the collection. The point of my story is this. My daughter used the heart message to unlock the key to my father's heart. She did that backflip and stuck it. That message stuck. How is our message of liberty sticking with the friends and sphere of influence we have? This is where the story of the Lyceum comes in. The Lyceum is, of course, the school of higher learning. Aristotle taught in the Lyceum. Not that I'm going to teach you anything, but I have taught or have learned from some of the greatest, the world champions of public speaking. Dana Lamont, David Brooks, Craig Ballantyne. I've learned from all these folks in person and on video. And some interesting things have come about because of this. I've put together some of their thoughts in a process that I think can help all of us with our message of liberty. I term it 3 + 3 WIIFM. The first three. This comes from Dana Lamont, world champion of public speaking. Dana says, instead of talking about an opening, a body, and a conclusion with smooth transitions, do something different. Use a hook, a hammer, and a hinge. The hook. How do we grab somebody's attention? Well, as Toastmasters, we know we have an engaging question. We use some humor. We perhaps are using a quote, as I did. Grab people's attention so they're listening to you. You only have 9 seconds. And remember, most people's attention spans are like goldfish. 9 seconds goes by really quick. The hammer. Tell a story and make a point. Tell a story and make a point. But it's got to be your story. Don't use stories necessarily that you read from Chicken Soup of the Soul or one of those other great books, but use it as a catalyst to tell your own particular story. And then the hinge. What's the hinge? That's the call to action, like a hinge of a gate. What do you want me to do after spending time with you? I'm going to listen to Nathan on his radio show. He had a call to action. So what do you want me to do? Vote? Write a check? What do you want me to do after listening to you? The second three are more tactical. This is what I call the humor, the head, and the heart. Humor. David Brooks always says, when we laugh, we relax. And when we relax, we're more open to learning. So let's be a little funnier. I mean, if we observe life every day, it's pretty darn funny. Let's tell those stories. The heart. I mentioned my daughter's story, the story of Lizard. One of the things we go to as conservatives or Republicans or people centered to right is we go to the head first. If we go to the heart first and tell our personal stories, we're more likely to make that bond and connect. With the heart story, sometimes people say, well, I'm not that emotional. So here's a suggestion. Again, David Brooks talks about there are 6 universal emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, surprise, and disgust and fear. Make a file for each one of those. And then when you have the opportunity to read something on the internet or a book or see a movie, put that in your tickler file under one of those topics. And then read it out loud if you're looking for a story to use, and then have a conversation with yourself. Now, I know you're going to think, talking to yourself after you read something, think of it as a conversation with somebody else. And all of a sudden you'll say, well, that's like the time and then start writing down. So that's a great way to get in touch with an emotion or a heart message. And the last part is the head. Now, with the head, as conservatives, a lot of folks like to go there right with their facts and figures. How's that for attracting people or connecting with people? I would contend it usually turns them off. So what we would do, I would suggest, is first be likable. Get to know the person, ask questions. Then be credible. And then only then, go to your content, your confidence. Most conservatives go right to their confidence with their facts and figures, and it comes off as arrogant. So we don't want to be arrogant. We want to be likable and believable. So go there first. Now the last part is the WIIFM. That's what your audience is doing as soon as you get up and talk. It means, what is in it for me? It's a radio station we're all tuned to. And if you don't connect in that 9 seconds, you're going to lose your audience. So 3 + 3, what's in it for me? In closing, let me share with you, as our friend Ben Martin so often says, and I take it to heart, liberty is the responsible exercise of freedom. How will you responsibly go to your sphere of influence and influence your friends and family to attract, connect, and engage? That's our challenge. Madam Toastmaster.